Hey, this is Colabcoaching. Yet again, it's just wise words of wisdom. This is a brand new series that I'm doing, having conversations with good friends of mine about different topics so that you can share more information and help people along the way. So, without any further ado, this is the wonderful Nickesha. I've known her for 6, 7 plus years now. We met at grad school, getting our counseling degree, and she's an active counselor. I went to the coaching level, but she's an amazing active counselor. And Nikisha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, yes. Hi, I'm Nickesha. I am a mental health counselor, or a psychotherapist, like I like to introduce myself. I actually just got my license. And yes, we've known each other for several years now, long running friendship. And I'm just I love to be here with you, catching up and kind of talking to your audience.
Awesome, awesome. So the topic for our discussion today is centered a little bit around your field and also personal experiences. So the question for you is, you being a young immigrant, of course, Nikisha is originally from Jamaica. So with her being a young immigrant, how has that experience been? I guess assimilating to the United States lifestyle and how you gain perspective, especially with your personal life and also as far as counseling and dealing with those different dynamics, being Black, being Jamaican, whatever titles that they give you. How has that experience been?
Mhm. So yes, I'm from Jamaica. I actually moved away when I was about 13,
Mhm.
and I took a detour, you can say, to England. I went to high school in England, and then I moved here when I was 18 for college. And, you know, at this point in my life, I've actually been out of Jamaica longer than I was ever there. But
Oh,
it's interesting because that stuff, right, that developmental years can never leave you.
wow.
And so I take my culture, my people wherever I go, right?
Yeah.
Um, Moving between England and here was definitely, I live in Atlanta right now, was definitely culture shock.
Mhm.
But great thing for me is I love culture. So I love culture. So it's been an expanding of my world, in good ways and negative ways. But overall, it's been what I make it. And that's been positive. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Um, Go ahead.
No, I said that's amazing. Yeah, especially you have a lot of different dynamics. You have your perspective from Jamaica, your perspective from England, your perspective in the South of the United States, not even the United States, because the South is a whole different culture in itself. So going through all of that, what would you say is the culture that you probably learned the most? Would you say it's the Jamaican culture, as you said, you have the roots in Jamaica, but which culture would you say has shifted your perspective the most? Or would you say all 3?
Ooh, all three for sure. All three for sure. But I think the best part is the people I've met along the way, right? So in high school, my best friend was from Bulgaria.
Wow.
Never heard of that until I moved to London and I met her in class, right? So
Mhm.
now I have this introduction of this little known culture.
Mhm.
And then once I moved to Atlanta, the West African community was so large here.
Yeah.
And I really kind of like delved into that culture. And I think just meeting different people from the African diaspora has been amazing, right? So kind of just understanding how, whether it be, Black British, West African, Caribbean, Black American, we have so much more in common than different. And that's been amazing. And then I also think, I speak a lot about what I've learned from the West African culture, how they view things. I found a lot of my African friends were not first generation college graduates like I was.
Mm-hmm.
So they had that legacy behind them and how that changed their perspective. And I think, when it comes to the Caribbeans and the Black Americans, we have the first generation. We're the first to start something. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have a different perspective, but there's so much to learn,
Right.
which I have, right? So I think all of the places I've lived and all the cultures I've interacted with have impacted me more positively than negatively for sure.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. Yeah. And speaking, me being a first generation Ghanaian American, yeah, I completely agree with you. Like just learning that you have a whole other culture that you have within you, or learning that you come from a whole different other culture. It kind of gives you a little bit of pride. It gives you a little bit of
Mhm.
a sense of like not entitlement, but I would say like, whoa, yeah, I can trace my background so much, so, and it makes you feel kind of good inside with that respect. So
Yeah.
I guess, especially with you dealing with, different cultures that you experience, how has that played in with the counseling world? That you being a counselor, has it been just an experience as far as learning different people's perspectives other than yours, or is it more of a situation where you're more equipped to be a counselor because you have dealt with so many different cultures?
Definitely equipped. That's
Mhm.
been my perspective, is that I'm more equipped, right? So I really take a lot of interest in different cultures and their mental health approach.
Mhm.
Whenever I start a new job or a new environment, I do research, right? Not just in like talk in conversations, but also, academic research on the different colleges and
Mhm.
universities and how they interact with the international community. So
Yeah.
international students or immigrants, and how do we get them involved in the counseling center? How do we get them to be accessing the health care that the university provided? And
Mhm.
then now, as I am like working and stuff, my first question in an interview, in any first day that I get a chance is, okay, so like, is this service accessible
Mhm.
to other socioeconomic groups? Is there diversity amongst the clients that you're seeing?
Mhm.
If not, how can we increase that? So always making sure that I'm working or advocating for diversity and just kind of, having mental health be accessible to the immigrant community. It's really important to me. And so even how, I approach clients, thankfully, I've been blessed to work with a variety of people. Like right now, I have clients that are from Turkey, from Iran, from West Africa, from different parts of America. So I get to kind of learn and know that not everyone is the same,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everyone has unique situations, and the best approach I have is to have people educate me on, what are you coming to the session with?
Mhm.
Does your culture play a role?
Yeah.
Sometimes they can have blind side to not seeing that it's a cultural thing, and
True.
kind of making that awareness as well.
Mhm.
And then, letting them kind of show me like, how can I best help you? Because everyone is a expert on themselves.
Yeah.
And that's played a big role in like how I implement and practice therapy.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. So let's get down to the foundation of it all. Like, what made you even want to get into the whole counseling world? And did it have to play with the culture that brought you up? Was your family more into counseling, or did something that happened to you inspire you to get into counseling? Where did that all start?
I will say, right, I'm one of those, I guess, kind of rare because I've always wanted to be a therapist. That was my first, I'm going to be a shrink, you know, until I realized I want to go to the medical school so I couldn't be a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
But, we didn't have traditional therapy accessible in Jamaica.
Mhm.
What I noticed the most was that whether it be friends, family, they would gather at my parents' house.
Mhm.
They would talk to my mom. They would have questions. They wanted to hear advice. They wanted guidance, right? That's how mental health is kind of shaped
Yeah.
in Jamaica, right? It's not going to a therapist. It's going to a religious leader, it's going to a community elder, it's going to, the matriarchs of your family and asking for
Yeah.
guidance.
Mhm.
And I think once I realized that was a job, I was like, oh, that's it. That's what I want
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Because what I noticed is in these conversations, lives are being changed.
Mhm.
You know, decisions are being made that impacted that individual, but their children and their nieces and their nephews and their grandchildren,
Mhm.
and just the power in being able to have a safe space
Yeah.
to express yourself, to
Yeah.
talk about what's troubling you, to have a problem shared is a problem halved, right?
Mhm.
And just the power that had. And so I wanted to be more trained in it, be more trained in connecting with people and having those conversations.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what started my love of my interest for the mental health field. Now, of course, I know now it's wider, it can take, different avenues,
Mhm.
but that was like what kind of brought me to it, was just wanting that connection with people and hearing them out and giving them, guidance and facilitating their growth as best as I could.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And your story is so powerful because it speaks to me as well. Because in my culture as well, it's more of like we don't really go to talk to therapists. Therapy is not something that's discussed in the family table or with family members, stuff like that. And as you said, I've always felt like, I wanted to help people and I see people hurting and I see people going through certain situations, but they chose not to talk about it as much because they felt like they had to keep going about their day and they had other things they need to take care of. But it's so powerful, like you said, having that safe space to just express yourself. So, as you said, there's always the religious leader, there's always that one person, the old wise person in the culture that you do go talk to and stuff like that. But a lot of people in different cultures that are not, welcoming to therapy, I think it's powerful that they have someone like you that says, "Hey, I do come from a culture like this. I do come from a similar background to you, or even if I come from a different background, hey, we do have some connection because each culture is different, but we all go through something. We all go through certain
Oh,
things.
yeah.
So, if I took the push and said, hey, therapy might be something, maybe you could try it too. But at the same time, it's as you said, it's a culture shift. It's something that you have to keep showing and bringing to the forefront and allowing people to understand that hey, there are other options out there.
Mhm.
There are people out there that can sit with you and talk to you and help find ways to help make your life a little bit better. So,
Yeah. What I find is that there is stigma against mental health.
mhm,
No doubt there is. But I
mhm,
think what people get really caught up on is the term mental health,
yeah,
mental illness,
yeah,
right? A diagnosis. Because
mhm,
the truth is, the act of seeking help, we've been doing it for hundreds of years,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Just not in the traditional formal way that we do in the Western world.
exactly.
We actually have been. It's just the term going to a psychotherapist
Mhm,
that they're kind of, I don't like that. I've worked in settings before where we had to come up with other names, it's like coaches,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
To make it seem more like approachable,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because they just didn't like the idea of sitting with me in an office on a couch, right? But we could go for a walk and talk,
yeah,
and they would be perfectly fine with that.
yeah,
So it's just also just making it seem like, it doesn't have to be this way you've seen in movies. It doesn't have to be this way that you've seen white people do it or rich people do it. It can
mhm,
also just be what we're doing right now.
yeah,
You have been through something, you're worth having someone listen to what you're going through
mhm,
and invest in that and guide you through that.
yeah,
You're worth it.
yeah,
So a lot of the conversation I've had is about that. And also being an immigrant, being a Black woman and being a therapist changes the game.
mhm,
Changes the game because people didn't know, right? They don't see me and think therapist.
yeah,
They know that I can be an emotional support, but they don't see, oh, a therapist.
yeah,
And they don't think they can go to therapy and see someone that looks like them and that's relatable. So
mhm,
having, being in that space has opened up the world for so many people. And I'm so happy with all like the, push for minority mental health right now. I love seeing it.
Yeah,
It's good
yeah,
for us.
yeah, exactly.
Having a Black man in the mental health field like yourself, you're
Mhm.
a unicorn. And I love that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I agree. I completely agree. It's so powerful to, and it's crazy because when we were both taking classes, we didn't think that, mental health would be such a big thing as it is now, or not even a big thing. Is the spotlight is on it now, but now look at where we are because we took that effort to say, hey, we want to make a difference in the world. We want to make a difference in our community, and now look at us now. We're actually doing it. So it's so powerful to realize that, hey, and as you said, you see a lot of white people or people of different colors. They go to therapy because of the fact that they have people that look like them that they go talk to. But as far as the Black community, the African American community, and people of color culture, it's hard to find those people. But now things are starting to open up and things are
Yeah.
being exposed. Like, hey, there are people that are therapists, there are people that are coaches, there are people that are psychiatrists and that are Black and they understand the journey that they have gone through as well. Because it's
Mhm.
always, I guess it's not, 100% perfect, but at the same time, at least that there's someone that can understand your pain a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, being an immigrant as well, that's something that not enough therapists are aware of. And
Yeah,
so I can see the light on my client's face when I'm aware of what the immigration process looks like.
yeah, yeah.
I understand what they're talking about. That's not something they have to explain to me like they feel like they have to explain to everyone else that they're talking to.
Mhm.
Having immigrant parents is something I can talk about, right? Because my
Yeah,
parents moved here as well. And so it's like, oh yeah, okay, so you get it, right? Like, oh, you get it. That's not something that needs to be changed. That's just something I need to know how to navigate.
yeah,
And so it just makes such a big difference. And I love being in this space. I love the fact that Caribbeans are getting more into therapy.
yeah.
I just read this amazing book. It's called Queenie
Mhm,
by Candice Carty Williams.
mhm,
And it's based in London, right? And it's about a Black woman, Queenie. Her parents, are lived in England, but they're originally from Jamaica.
mhm.
One, I got emotional because I've never seen myself in a
Yeah.
story before, right? Like we lived in
Yeah.
the same place in London and we're both Jamaican and she's curvy. And I was like, get it. you know. But we saw this in this book, the character of Queenie stumbles. Like she stumbles, she messes up at work, she is horrible with men,
Mhm,
she makes bad decisions and she has a mental breakdown and she has to go to therapy.
mhm.
And her family, traditional Jamaicans, like, no, we don't go to therapy. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
But you're not a psychopath. You're
Mhm.
not psycho. You're gonna go to psychotherapy. And then there's this moment in the book when her granddad comes and he's like, go to therapy. I wish I was able to speak to someone and I would be, if that was the case, if I could talk to someone, I wouldn't be dying with so many things on my heart. And
Yeah.
I sobbed. I sobbed when I heard this old man, said that because I was just like, not because it wasn't done this way in our families, not because, people only go to religious leaders and not a therapist doesn't mean that it can't be done now.
Yeah.
It's about having awareness, understanding that um, therapy is accessible now when it wasn't accessible to our parents or our grandparents.
Mhm.
And so, you get to make that decision, you get to change that path.
Yeah.
And, that reminded me even of an earlier conversation about how being an immigrant has shaped me. And a part of that is also being aware of like the generational curses. That's a hot topic right now, but
Yeah.
also generational blessings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also being able to say, well, this is how what my family did. This is how I can change the narrative. This is how I
Mhm.
can make it easier and more approachable.
Mhm.
Um, and this is how I can make a better way for my future and for future generations as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really love that book. And I just love the idea of our communities, right? The West African, the Caribbean, the African American communities kind of tapping more into prioritizing mental health.
Yeah, I think it's powerful too, and of course I'm going to check that book out this week or this month for sure because I love that story as well. Just having the perspective of someone that is conflicted and figuring out what they want to do, and they have an option, but they're afraid of what the culture is going to say about it. So I love that. I love that too. And I think the powerful thing about it is that a lot of people, especially clients that I've worked with, I'm pretty sure different clients we talk to as well. It's like they feel like they don't have options. They feel like they can only do A or B. But what therapy does is that it gives them the option of C. Like, okay, yes, it's scary. Yes, you never done it before. Yes, your culture says that it's a taboo in a sense, but at least you give it a try. And once you give it a try, as you said, the next generation coming after you can know that that's an option as well. Instead of
Mhm.
our generation thinking that, well, the only option they have was A and B. So it opens doors to a whole bunch of possibilities. So I guess my question for you is that what was that moment for you that you figured out like, this is it? Like I know you say you wanted to be you thought about being a shrink all your childhood and things like that, but maybe during your counseling experience or even before or even right now, like what was that moment that you realized that this is worth it? This is it for me. This is I'm making a difference. I'm happy about
Mhm. My most recent position, I was working with a lot of um, clients who were experiencing homelessness
it.
or just unstable housing. A lot of them had been in prison and, were released or were in DFAXed or grew up in foster care.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working in a place where they were able to live permanently if they choose.
So,
Um, and they did not want to speak to me. They're like, you're a therapist, X, don't want you.
mm-hmm.
But then the few that I was able to kind of get through to, right? And I worked for it. I planned casual groups. I came up with creative names. I was using rap songs and rap lyrics for the name of groups and stuff. I was talking about anime with these young Black guys and linking One Piece to to friendships and relationships. Like I was doing it, right?
Awesome.
And I remember the therapist I stepped in after was a white female who was cool,
Yeah.
amazing. And I thought, oh, she's great. She's older than me. She has so much experience. But time after time after time, I heard, you're so straightforward, Miss Nickesha. Oh, you're Black, you're like me, Miss Nickesha. There
Mm-hmm.
were things that they could just words they could use that I
Yeah.
didn't have to explain to me because I understood. And life experiences that they just I just understood because I think I take it for granted that I'm just like a Black woman living in Georgia, just like them.
Yeah.
And then I heard it. I heard you're a Black woman, so I came here. You're a
Mhm.
Black woman, so I could, be more open to it. And I
Wow.
was like, oh, I remember I had this Black grandma who brought her 12-year-old little daughter to me,
Hmm.
granddaughter to me. And bless you. And I heard, oh, I really want a young Black therapist. And it was only me. It was only me. And so I think about how, that was kind of purpose, right? I have a purpose of giving them that space and giving them someone they can identify with when they didn't feel like they had that before. And so that was definitely the one I felt the most like, okay, I'm making a difference. Just little me, just little me, I'm making a difference and my presence matters.
Wow, man, that's amazing. That's amazing. Just imagine like all the people that you were able to help and who they tell, like, okay, well, I've had plenty of therapists in my life, or I've talked to therapists before, but because I was able to talk to someone that kind of looks like me or knows my story, um, and they could tell it to people, their family, and that could pass on. And like you said, the generational shift starts, and
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And this too about this idea of, the family of origin and
Mhm.
how we play out this family of origin with us, with every relationship we have.
Yeah.
And so what I found is with these young Black people, whether they were putting me, because transference, countertransference, it is positive tool if you know how to use it correctly in therapy. So they were seeing me as big sis, little sis, mom, aunt, right? And they were able to kind of develop a better relationship, make a different story with me. And so hopefully they could take that with their actual mom, with their spouse, with their children, right, with their siblings. And I think that was healing just on itself.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I guess my last question for you is, what would you say to someone that's on the fence of thinking about, seeking a counselor or going to therapy, and maybe their culture is in the way, or maybe they're afraid of their culture not being as pleasant as far as being accepted? I guess not pleasant, but being accepting of it. What would you say to that person? With you being a counselor, you have gone through that.
Yeah. My favorite quote is that a successful person starts off with two beliefs. One is that the future can be different than the present. And two is that they have the power to do so, right? To make it so.
Wow.
And so even though there might be pushback, right? There might be stigma against seeking mental help, do it.
Yeah.
Because you've tried, different ways up until now. So this is a new way of trying it.
Yeah.
But also, right, it's like be intentional about the life you're trying to create. Be intentional about what you want out of your life. And so, and take steps to make a change.
Yeah.
And so I find that people can be so intentional when it comes to finding a job or starting school, right? We write our resumes, we go on Indeed, we go on all these magazines, and we go onto the school website. But when it comes to like making changes in other areas of their life, they think it should just kind of fall into their lap, right? They don't go, okay, well, I want to make this change, so let me find a therapist. Let me find one that looks like me. Let me see what they're about. Let me read their bio. I think you should take the same energy that you would from finding a job to finding a therapist. Also say take the same energy finding a spouse, but that's a whole different conversation.
That's a part two conversation. Oh man.
And so there's so many ways right now. There is, if you literally go on Instagram right now and just type in Black mental health, you will have a plethora of resources available. You can go to Psychology Today, right, which is a popular way of searching for a therapist, and you can say, I just want to, I want a man or I want a woman, and I want African American, and they will filter it out for you. Same way you shop for clothes. You can shop for a therapist. You can go to, I think, therapist for Black girls. And you also find a list of people in your area as well. And, there's just so many ways for you to be able to just find that person, find your match. They're out there. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your journey and providing resources to people. If people want to reach you, how can they get in contact with you?
So right now I'm not seeing clients individually, but I do have a wonderful Instagram page that kind of, can be a bright spark to your day. It's called intentionally_balance. It's a great way of, finding other resources and, finding motivational things and tools that you can use as you build the life you want.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. We'll probably have you come and join us again.
I hope so.
Part 2, where we start a whole new topic. Maybe that relationship aspect is kind of interesting because I'm a coach, so I can talk about that kind of stuff all day. So we could definitely have another conversation with that as well. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.